Hi, grade 10. Today I would like to go over the work for lesson 3, which is on the nucleus and the mitochondria. Okay, let's just share. Okay, so here is the first page on the nucleus. It's also on page 45 of your textbooks. So as we're all familiar with, the nucleus is the control center of the cell. It contains the DNA, the genetic information, which instructs the cell what to do. Now, every single cell in your body has got a nucleus, well, except for red blood cells. When they emerge from the bones, they're made in the bones by cell division. Their nucleus has broken down and it makes space for more hemoglobin. But that's another story. Okay, so all of your cells have got nuclei because we are eukaryotic organisms, and every single cell in your body has exactly the same DNA. But in your skin, the cells for, or at least the genes for making keratin, the protein keratin will be switched on. In the white blood cells, the gene for making antibodies will be switched on. In the red blood cells, excuse me, the gene for making hemoglobin will be switched on. In your stomach, the gene for making enzymes will be switched on. In your glands, the one for hormones. Okay, so all cells have the same DNA, but different genes get switched on in different cells, just like we have different rooms in, different lights in different rooms. All right, so normally the nucleus is located or found somewhere in the middle of the cell. It also depends if it's being pushed to one side. For example, in a plant cell, when it's pushed to one side by the large growing vacuole, a double nuclear membrane surrounds the nucleus, which you can see over here. A bit difficult to see on, well, sort of there. There's a double nuclear membrane on an electron micrograph. So that is a cross-section through a nucleus, and it contains the genetic information. Now, genetic information is made of a biological and organic molecule called DNA, which contains nitrogen, which you learned in term 1. Now, regions on the DNA molecule, I'm just going to use, I'm just going to use my spare earbuds. Okay, so that's a DNA molecule. Regions on it are known as genes, and different genes control different characteristics or functions of an organism. So we've got about 20,000 genes on all the different DNA molecules. There are 23 pairs of DNA molecules. We know them as chromosomes. Okay, so we'll get used to the word chromosomes later on. So regions on the DNA molecule are called genes, and they control different characteristics or functions of the cell, the organism, etc. Now, this is where people get confused. Okay, so the genetic material is made of DNA, but the DNA can take on different forms. So if I have a piece of wood, I can make a chair, I can make a desk. It's still wood, but it can be in different forms. So the genetic material is DNA, but it can take on different forms depending on what's happening inside the cell at that particular moment. So I'll show you in a picture on the next slide, but when the DNA is thread-like, okay, when it looks like strands of wool or like my earbud cord, okay, then we call it chromatin. And now that is when the cell isn't dividing. The DNA is all spread out in the nucleus. But then during cell division, that the DNA molecules, there's 46 or 23 pairs of them per cell, it coils up. All right, so you can see how my cord is coiling up, and that's going to become a chromosome. Okay, so when the DNA is thread-like, it's called chromatin, but when it condenses and coils up in preparation for cell division, then we call it a chromosome. Now over here, you can see there's a cross-section of the nucleus. All this on the outside, that's the endoplasmic reticulum. This is the nucleolus, and there's some DNA there. Now remember, DNA is thread-like, but if you're cutting through the nucleus, you're going to see the ends of the DNA molecules. And that's why it looks very granular over there, and the white area would be the nucleoplasm. All right, so here we've got outer membrane, inner membrane, nucleoplasm. So the DNA would be suspended there. The nucleolus, and here is a collection of RNA. Okay, you've got the nuclear pores, all right, and they would allow different things to move, molecules to move in and out of the nucleus. And sometimes we call this nuclear membrane a nuclear envelope. Okay, so on the next page, we would normally draw the cross-section of the nucleus, but I'm going to show, I've scanned, well, first the DNA. Okay, so as I've said, DNA is genetic material. When the cell's not dividing, the DNA is thread-like. We call it chromatin. The human cells, they've got 23 times 2, okay, 23 pairs of DNA threads called chromatin. But then the cell prepares for cell division, and the DNA coils up, and then you end up with structures known as chromosomes. So there's a chromosome, sorry about that. There's a chromosome, the DNA is coiled up. But now when a cell divides, when we do the section of mitosis, you can't have one cell dividing into two and then fighting over the strand of DNA that's coiled up. So DNA replication takes place. That's when the DNA is copied. So it started off with one DNA molecule coiled up, and then it copies itself, and now you've got two of them, two DNA molecules coiled up, and they're held together by a region called the centromere. And each of those DNA molecules are known as chromatids. So they're held by the centromere, and this is now a replicated chromosome, and then it's easy for that structure to separate, and each daughter cell will get a copy of the original DNA. But that's going to tie in with cell division later on. All right, so now, as I said before, the nucleolus, it's not surrounded by a membrane. It's a region where RNA is stored, and RNA is used to make the ribosomes of the cell, and it's also used in a process called protein synthesis, which we learn about in grade 12. Now, I've said there's an error on page 45. It might be crossed out in your books already. So above this diagram, there's an error there. I'm just going to read it out. Okay, so it says, when the cell is not dividing, the chromosomes relax. In other words, the chromosomes uncoil into a tangle of chromatin material. Please cross out which forms a nucleolus. The chromatin does not form a nucleolus. That just doesn't make sense at all. And then the rest of the sentence is fine. The nucleolus is a small, dense brown body in the nucleus where the ribosomes are assembled. That's a store of RNA. The ribosomes are assembled, and then they can move to where they are, where they will be moved to the cytoplasm or attached to the ER. All right. So here is a nucleus. Now, it's a photograph where they have, if you think of a nucleus, it's a spherical structure. Okay. So what they've done here, there's cytoplasm around here. So this is this photograph was produced by a process called freeze fracturing. So they kind of locked off the cytoplasm. All right. So now you've got the top cytoplasm is gone, and you've got this nucleus which is now sticking out. All right. So there's cytoplasm, and then they lock the top cytoplasm off, and now you're seeing the bulge of the nucleus, if you understand what I mean. So there's cytoplasm. All right. And there's the bulge of the nucleus sticking out above, like half burying this golf ball in the ground, okay? And we can see that it's got a double membrane. There's part of the top membrane, and the rest of it was peeled off, and below it is the inner membrane, right? And you can see these little round structures. Those are the nuclear pores. Okay, now they're not really pores. They're actually, they're called nuclear complexes, but that's, what you study at university. Too much for us. Okay, and what I need you to do is activity 45 on page 45, and there are 6 questions on the nucleus. Okay, so as long as you remember, the nucleus is a spherical structure, and the little dimples on the golf ball, they represent where the nuclear pores are. And inside you've got the nucleoplasm, and suspended in that is the DNA. Either it's thread-like or coiled up to form chromosomes, and the nucleolus, where the RNA is stored and where ribosomes are made. All right, so there's my diagram. I would have asked you to do that in class. So this is a transverse section cutting through the nucleus, and you can see here, double nuclear membrane. The rough ER, smooth ER is always closely associated to the nucleus because it allows for transport. That's another lesson. There's a nuclear pore. I've drawn it really big. There's the nucleolus. This cell is not dividing because the DNA is thread-like, so we can call it chromatin. And nucleolus, where RNA is found and where ribosomes are assembled. And just like we call the cytoplasm around the nucleus, we're going to call the jelly-like matrix, the ground substance of the nucleus, the nucleoplasm, in which the nucleolus and the DNA is suspended. All right, so I'm going to stop this video, and the next video will be about mitochondria.